Hello, people. And despite the fact that Coinbase has recently made an all-time high, I still think it's massively undervalued. And we're going to talk about why. It has a lot to do with the development of Bitcoin and crypto. If you look at the Coinbase graph, yes, we've had a lot of pretty much all-time highs, both here in December and also just recently on June 27th. But however, if you look back here, we've had a pretty close to all-time high back in November of 2021 during like the peak of the last bull run. But the peak of the last bull run was only $69,000, and now we are 50% higher at $107,000. Now that obviously has an effect on Coinbase stock, and it should be higher because yes, the volume isn't as high overall crypto as it was during the peak of the last bull run, but Bitcoin is much higher. And Coinbase has substantial holdings in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and even Ethereum, I believe, is higher than it was back November of 21. It's not quite as high as the all-time high, but I think that was April of 21. But either way, they mostly have holdings in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is much higher, so their stock is much higher. But that's not actually the main reason I think Coinbase is undervalued. The crypto market, especially stablecoins and things, have developed a lot. And Coinbase has taken center stage in that, having its own USDC transference system. And Coinbase, let's not forget, actually has partial ownership, minority stake in USDC, which just went IPO. USDC upon IPO pumped like crazy, and I still believe it's above $200, which means the entire industry is severely undervalued, especially when it comes relating to Bitcoin. And since Coinbase is both Bitcoin and part of Circle, well, I think Coinbase is severely undervalued. So, this is the other thing I want to talk about. It's become the Wall Street go-to for crypto custody. Now, we know that cryptocurrency is a $1 trillion industry, and custody is going to be very big. With Coinbase being Wall Street's go-to, they eventually could be an entity like JP Morgan or Bank of America as crypto goes more and more mainstream. As we've mentioned in the last video I made, if you haven't watched, you should go watch that. Coinbase, basically like BlackRock's IBIT ETF, their Bitcoin ETF, has actually surpassed their S&P 500 ETF in terms of fees collected, and it's become one of their most popular ETFs and their fastest growing ETF ever, and that's not going to change. And that just goes to show you how maybe not all of crypto, but at least Bitcoin has actually gone mainstream and is looked at as more of a hedge. I didn't think the day would come to this, but it obviously has. And of course, Coinbase being Wall Street's go-to for crypto custody is a very, very big deal. So Coinbase is rapidly becoming the backbone of U.S. infrastructure for U.S. institutions, with new data showing it holds custody over the vast majority of crypto assets linked to American ETFs. And of course, we all know that American ETFs are going to be the ETFs with the most money. Coinbase is going to be holding those American ETFs in its own custody. And maybe they'll have like yield-bearing stuff for those ETFs, and Coinbase will collect a fee. That's right, folks. Coinbase will indeed collect a fee. So Brian Armstrong revealed the company actually secures 81% of the $140 billion in digital assets held by these funds, a clear sign of growing institutional reliance on the platform. Now, I believe that $140 billion is going to massively grow. How much? Could be as much as trillions of dollars within the next 10 years. And of course, with that, Coinbase revenues is going to grow, and Coinbase stock price is going to grow. Now, how much will Coinbase stock price grow, and how much is it undervalued? So the market cap is $90 billion right now, but I do believe it can actually grow to several $100 billion. I think you just look at like these big financial companies like BlackRock, Fidelity. You also look at JP Morgan and all those big banks, and Coinbase does actually have a chance to surpass all of them in market cap because in America, all these big banks are split, and there's a lot of competition between the big banks. But as you can see for Coinbase custody, Coinbase holds like 80% of the custody, and it's not really being challenged. Yes, I know Kraken is going to IPO, and Kraken, maybe can provide some challenge to Coinbase, but that hasn't happened yet. And it's, when one company is so dominant, especially in crypto, it's very, very difficult for other companies to catch up. Think about USDT, USDC. Think about just Bitcoin and how no other coin even comes close, despite all the promises of utility by the altcoins. Now, I think Kraken's going to be better competition for Coinbase than all these other so-called utility coins is going to be for Bitcoin, because Kraken actually generates revenue. They have numbers, and they actually have a legitimate business that actually makes profit, not just like promises of profit or promises of utility. But however, I think it's going to take them some time, and there's very few companies that actually depend on Kraken for custody. So I think several hundred billion, maybe 300-400 billion is not out of the question for Coinbase, being like the primary and basically majority custodian for basically US-based crypto ETFs, and we know those are actually going to grow. So this is really, really big. Major corporate players also seem to favor Coinbase. 8 of the 10 biggest publicly traded companies with Bitcoin on their balance sheets use Coinbase Prime, the firm's institutional platform for secure trading and storage. So a lot of them also use Coinbase for trading, and that just means Coinbase is going to gather a lot of fees for the United States. We know that the United States is by far the biggest market for crypto in the world. No other country really comes close. The EU as a whole, in terms of crypto volume, still falls behind the US, and Korea, despite their fanatical love for altcoins, they just don't have enough capital and they don't have enough people. So the US is the 900-pound gorilla in the room. Coinbase dominates the US. If you really think about exchanges in the US, you have Coinbase, you have maybe Binance.us, but they're not really a major player. You have Kraken, you have Gemini. Uphold, I don't really count as an actual exchange. They're more of a brokerage to me. And Coinbase is the first thing people think of in the United States when they think of an exchange. And that mental advantage is very, very big. And I don't think any company is really going to overcome it anytime soon. The momentum doesn't stop there. Coinbase has tracked more than 50 ETF applications so far this year, underlining how quickly traditional finance is embracing crypto investment vehicles. That surge in filings is helping fuel bullish sentiment around the company. And of course, brokerage firm Bernstein recently raised its price target on Coinbase stock to $510. And I think it's going to be more than $510 when it's all said and done, especially in the long term. You have $353 right now. $510, that's pretty much a 50% gain. And that's really, really good for any kind of ROI for a company. I mean, if you're investing in shit coins and stuff, obviously you want more than a 50% gain in any amount of time. But Coinbase, a solid stock whose risk is highly mitigated, that is a really, really good ROI. So I do think Coinbase is one of the best crypto buys right now. I mean, I would probably still put Bitcoin above it at this point, but realistically, it might actually have higher ROI than Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin basically has value because it's trusted. It was first, obviously, and a lot of institutions are actually investing in it. But Coinbase is a company that is starting to dominate the United States in terms of crypto. But more than that, you have to realize that Coinbase basically is it's a profit generating company, and their profits are only going to get larger as their dominance gets larger. Like I said, $140 billion in custody right now. That could easily turn into $1 trillion or more within the next 10 years. That means the fees on Coinbase are going to go way, way up. In terms of revenue, and they're going to attract more investors. So I think this 4-year high right now for Coinbase is essentially only the beginning, and I think Coinbase's bottom in the bear market, it's going to dip less than Bitcoin in the bear market. I also think the US, since it's basically loosening up on regulations, Coinbase is going to have way more wiggle room to do things like derivatives, to do things like futures, and they probably can offer higher leverage in the future. So pretty much both the regulatory front and the business front on Coinbase is really, really looking up. And I do think people have to really start considering Coinbase as a possible major investment vehicle for crypto. Some people will scoff we would rather just invest in crypto coins. And if we want to be safe, we want to invest in ETFs. But Coinbase stock might just outgain Bitcoin ETFs in value, and I think it's good to have a diversified portfolio. And if you really love crypto and you want to be in the stock market, Coinbase is a great choice, and I do think it's severely undervalued. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.